Hey, Patrick.
Hello and welcome. I'm Rosemary Pena, president of the Black German Heritage and Research Association and adjunct professor of German studies at UBC Vancouver. Our conversation today is the 7th in our new Black German and Beyond series, and my colleague, Dr. Emily Fraser-Rath, and I are thrilled to welcome our very special guest, Sharon Dodua, Otoo. At any time, we ask that you please put your questions for Sharon in the Q&A and use the chat function for your greetings and comments. So as not to waste one moment of her time with us, I'll invite Emily to first share a little about our sponsors and our work together before introducing Sharon more formally. Emily?
Thank you, Rosemary. My name is Emily Fraser-Rath, and I'm a visiting assistant professor of German studies at Davidson College, which is located just north of Charlotte, North Carolina in the US. And I'm also the executive director of the BGHRA. We are so excited today to have Sharon Dodua Otoo with us for what will, I'm sure, be a fun and informative conversation about Sharon's journey, family, work, and more. This event and Sharon's virtual visit to our German 351 or race, gender, migration class at Davidson College tomorrow, during which students will have the opportunity to speak with Sharon about her award-winning short story, Herr Gottschalk setzt sich hin, or Herr Gottschalk takes a seat in German and in English, are the result of an international collaboration between people who value and support the conversations we've been able to have here at the BGHRA. And have recorded and archived with people whose lives and work intersect with, influence, shape, and inform Black German studies. Rosemary and I, on behalf of the BGHRA, would like to thank our partners in the CINUS, or Central, Eastern, and Northern European Studies Department at the University of British Columbia, as well as our friends at the DEFA Film Archive and the Department of German Studies at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Our special thanks go out to Dr. David Gramling, CNS Chair at UBC, as well as to Dr. Mariana Ivanova, Associate Professor of German Film and Media and Academic Director of the DEFA Film Library, and Dr. Skylar Arndt Briggs, Executive Director of the DEFA Film Library, both at UMass Amherst. So thank you to David, Mariana, and Sky. In addition, this series would National Studies Program Speakers Fund here at Davidson, and the interim director of the Dean Rusk program, Dr. Verna Case, as well as its program administrator, Mel Zweifel. Meg Swicky, our German Studies Department Administrator, Jennifer Joyce, and Susan Caldwell, our college's payroll coordinators, make everything happen, and we cannot thank them all enough for their support. So thanks to Meg, Mel, Verna, Susan, and Jennifer. Again, thank you. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our guest today, Sharon Dodua Otoo. Sharon is an author and a political activist. She writes prose and essays and is editor of the English language book series Witnessed with Edition Assemblage. In 2017, her first novellas, The Things I'm Thinking While Smiling Politely and Synchronicity, were republished in German translation by S. Fischer Verlag. Otoo won the Ingeborg Bachmann Prize in 2016 with the text Herr Gottschalk setzt sich hin. In 2020, her inaugural speech at the Festival of German Language Literature, Dürfen schwarze Blumen malen, was published by Verlag Heim. Ada's Raum, her first novel, appeared in 2021 with S. Fischer Verlag in German, and soon it will appear in English too. Otoo is politically active with the Black queer feminist organization ADEFRA, with Initiative Schwarze Deutsche, or ASD, in Deutschland, and Phoenix. She lives with her family in Berlin. And so now I'd like to turn things over to Sharon to introduce yourself in your own words. Tell us a little bit about what you're working on, what you have worked on, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So thank you very much for this invitation. It's so nice to be back, so to speak, with the BGHRA. When I had a look at the Twitter advert for this event, I also looked in at the talk I gave back in 2013, and it was very funny to see myself talking and thinking about what I've been doing at that time. Sandrine and I had just brought out the Little Book of Big Visions, and yeah, that was an exciting time, and it was really, really good that Sandrine and I were invited to talk about in the context of BGHRA. And I remember thinking, oh, I wish that Germany would also be a place where we could be presenting our work in such conferences, and it would get that much attention, also in an academic context. And I think since then, things have progressed. I think there has been change in the German, I would say German language context, so including Austria and Switzerland as well. And I'd like to talk about that a lot this evening. I'd be interested to hear what everybody else thinks about that too. But I still think that most of the interest in my work that looks beyond the fact that I'm a Black author, or in Germany, they would talk about me having a Migrationshintergrund, migration background. I think beyond that, still most of the interest that really deals with what I'm trying to do with my creative writing, my political aims with my creative writing, and what tricks I use linguistically or creatively with my characters and with the images I use. I think all of that happens more in English-speaking contexts, like in the German departments of the US and UK universities. And I'm wondering why. I think there are some people in Germany who are looking into my writing. I was fortunate enough to meet some of them while I was in Cambridge 2 weeks ago. But it just seems like, yeah, I still feel like there's a disconnect between the fact that I'm living here in Berlin, centered here, doing all my work here. There's so much going on culturally, artistically in Black communities and communities of color. So much exciting work, and it just doesn't seem to be getting the level of attention that I think it would deserve. I don't know, it's my impression, and I think it happens a lot more in English-speaking contexts, and I wonder why. Anyway, you asked me to introduce myself a bit. So what can I say? Since I came to the United States, that one time in 2013, I also, oh, I have a visitor. Yeah. Yeah, take it. Okay, one moment. Since I came in 2013, I continued writing, and the short story Herr Gröttrup setzt sich hin that you talked about, Emily, which is, I can hold it up, the publication, which appeared in this really beautiful bilingual edition with 2 translations into English, one US American and one British English. And shout out to Patrick, who's watching this evening, who's one of the translators. When I first wrote that short story, I actually wrote it because of my background as an activist. I was asked to write a text about critical whiteness, and that should have been an essay or an article for a collection, for an anthology. And I wrote to the editor and asked if she would mind if I would try to do it creatively. My thinking was, there are already a lot of excellent texts about critical whiteness, also written in the German language. There's the first anthology on critical whiteness, or kritisches Weißseinsforschung, Mythen, Masken und Subjekte. So for me, it was like, why should I write anything? It's all been said, right? So I said, what I would like to do is to try to use humor and confusion to perhaps reach people who wouldn't read the academic stuff, but maybe would read a literary text, and maybe then in that way gain access to ideas about privilege and marginalization. So the woman who was editing the work said, yes, you can do it. And that's how the story Herr Gertrude Setzichen came about. I originally wrote it as a kind of political intervention. And then in a way, luckily for me, at the time, I didn't consider it lucky. At the time, I was frustrated because the funding didn't come through for the publication. So it felt like all my hard work had gone to waste. And this story was in my Dropbox for a couple of years. But this turned out to be really good because for the competition, the texts have to be unpublished. So if I'd have published that text before, it would not have been eligible to enter into the competition. And this competition that I was asked to apply for is a very special competition because authors are asked to hand in an unpublished text, and then those who are chosen, 14 in total, present their work on live television, and then a jury discusses it on live television. Totally nerve-wracking. I only agreed to do it because I didn't really understand what it was, what this competition was all about. I think if I had known beforehand, I wouldn't have said yes. And I definitely wouldn't have handed in a story about an egg that doesn't go hard boiled and suddenly talks about being a carpet and an earthquake. I would not have gone there. It's very important for me to say that here. So I wrote this story. The story was then, through luck and chance and accident, entered into a German language literature competition. And then I think also through a combination of very good circumstances, the story actually was awarded the first prize. And from there, I was then, that was like the legitimation to invite me to different festivals, readings, and so on. And I also got an agent, and I also got a book contract. And then I would hold that up, Ada's Raum, which is my first novel. So I've written 2 novellas, and this is the first full-length novel. And thank you for that. And yeah, my first novel is written in German because the novel is something that grew out of the short story. And it was important for me to continue writing this particular story in German. I was trying to do something very specific with the short story and with the novel that wouldn't have worked if I'd written it in English and then it was translated. So since then, since the novel appeared, there's been, it's been interesting to see the reactions to the novel as well in German language context, in Literaturkritik and so on. I would say that it's been a brilliant start for me as a writer. I was very fortunate because I had this Bachmann Prize title. It meant that when my novel came out, which was still in the middle of the pandemic, there was a lot of interest still. People knew my name already before I'd published it and were waiting for this novel to appear. And so I had a much stronger position than many debut authors who were publishing at the same time. And who couldn't go, there was no Leipziger Buchmesse in that year, last year. The Frankfurter Buchmesse was also really scaled down, and lots of events were cancelled, but I still had a lot of interest in my work, and I was giving many online readings and still traveling when there were open air events. So I had a very good start, and I would say the readers, people who came to my readings, were giving me overwhelming positive feedback. And that sounds obvious because they were coming to my reading, but I think they were also really, they were telling me things about the novel that I hadn't read in any of the articles, the recensionen that I've been reading. So for example, the press had been mostly focused on the fact that I write about colonialism, and I include an analysis, I think about the Shoah, the Holocaust, in my novel. And to put these 2 subjects in the same piece of work is considered to be really risky. So there was a lot of focus on that. And I guess, yeah, like I said before, me being somebody with a Migrationshintergrund and me being a political, I call myself a political author, and they therefore read my work very, very as a clear political statement, whatever, against racism, against sexism. But the people who were coming to my readings didn't say so much about that. They were talking more about how they were moved by the intimate stories. For example, more than once, a woman would say that she lost a child shortly after birth, and how she was grateful to me that I had approached this very sensitive story that's somehow taboo as well, and somehow managed to tell this story and give it a kind of a, I don't want to say happy end, that's not the right word, but give it a hopeful outlook, like that it meant something that this event had taken place. Things like that were really touching for me. And it seemed to not have much space in the Literaturkritik. Yeah. And so what happened then was I began to think about the context within which my work is appearing. And I thought about other authors who have published. So the two authors that published before me, who are also Black and whose work was also kind of viewed through this lens of what does this author have to tell us about racism in Germany? That's Jackie Tourmé, Brüder, and Olivia Wenzel, Tausend Serpentine Angst. And I thought about the way, you know, I read a lot of their critiques as well, and I thought about how their work was discussed, and I thought about how my work was discussed, and about other authors, Mitu Sanyal and Shada Bazia, how our work was discussed. And I just felt like we can do better, you know. And so I then had this idea that it would be helpful, because I know there's a lot of goodwill. I know that in many editors in German language publishing houses really do want to reach out and find new writers, and are looking, for example, to access Black authors, and are really like, where are they and how can I get in touch and so on. I know that this is, many of them do want this. I know that agents actually do want this. And the networks don't seem to be there. You can't really Google Black author Germany and come up with a list of names, right? So I thought that what I would like to do is to be involved in trying to bring people together. So I do a lot of recommendations. I introduce people to people, and that's quite nice. And then I was invited this year to give the opening talk at the Ruhrfestspiel in Recklinghausen. This is an event it's a cultural event, goes on for about 6 weeks every year, and it's in its 76th year. And I happen to have the program here. That's the program. This year's motto is Haltung und Hoffnung. And it's a massive program, right? Over 6 weeks, different music, literature, circus, dance. And they asked me to give the opening speech this year, which is amazing. And I'm very honored, looking forward to that very much. That will be on the 3rd of May, I believe. And then they also said, we would very much like you to be involved curatorisch, they said. So like to think about the program itself over the 6 weeks, and whether there's anything you would like to contribute to that, which I was amazed by. And thinking about my idea about how can I contribute to the German language literature scene becoming, more diverse, for want of a better word. I told them about an idea that I'd been brewing for a while, which is to have at the time, I wanted to have a literature competition with Black authors and Black jury. So the authors would present their text and the jury would discuss it. And in this way, there'd be a real in-depth understanding of what it could mean, what Black German language literature could mean, what it could look like, what it could sound like, what kind of images would be chosen, what are the links to other Afro-diasporic literatures. And it would also highlight the expertise that Black literature critics bring when they're reading Black texts. These kinds of things were questions that I had, and I had the idea that this could be really exciting and interesting for many people. And I put that to the team at the Ruhrfestspiel in Recklinghausen, and they said, yes, let's do it. So this literature festival, I've gone away from the competition idea because I would like to think about a space where people who write in the German language context and are Black, that they just at all have a place where their literature is discussed, where they can just, I called it, where they can breathe out, right? Where they can just present their work and it really gets looked at in all its facets and it's given space and it's given respect. And it can be critically analyzed. There's no problem with critically discussing the text, but to do this in a respectful way from people who can see the many layers that are contained in the text. So it's going to be a festival. It's going to be an event where we'll have an opening evening on the 19th of May, Thursday the 19th of May. The opening speech is being given by Tsitsi Dangaremba. I'm so excited that she's agreed to give the opening address. Then we'll have like a Grußwort from Piret Herzberger Fofana. And then there'll be like the official introduction of the authors. Until that point, nobody knows. I'm the only one who knows who the authors are, or a couple of people who are doing the admin work as well. But the authors will then be presented in public, and then we'll all get to know them. And the jury will be presented. The jury members are already public. They are Ibu Koulibaly Diop. He's a curator and Literaturwissenschaftler. Also he studied literature critic, and he's living and working in Berlin in a decolonial context. Elisa Diallo is an author and a manager working in publishing house, a German language publishing house. She's also on the jury. And then we have Aminata Sissi Schleicher, who I know from back in the day in the ESD. And she was one of the inaugural members of the ESD when it was called something else and was in East Germany. And she also is a lover of literature and has studied literature and is also an author and translator journalist. And then the last person is Dominique Hensel, who has worked for Missy magazine. She's currently on the jury of the International Literature Prize, which is done by Haus der Kulturen der Welt, and is also an author. Yeah, they're a fantastic jury. And so they will be presented also on the evening. Then there'll be a reading by a young Black Austrian writer called Ada Diagne. She will be giving a reading in the evening, and then we'll have, we'll celebrate with music from Malonda Electric Diva. And and then the next day, I'm still on the festival, aren't I? The next day there'll be a lecture to kind of give it a kind of context. What are we discussing? What are we talking about? This will be from Philipp Kabe-Köpsel, who's an expert on Afro-Deutsche Literatur und Geschichte. He will be given a 20-minute lecture on Black German literature, Black German writers, going back to Douala Misipu, who was writing in the 1930s in Germany already. He wrote 2 novels actually, and they will talk about artists going right through to the present day. And then we'll hear from the first 3 authors who will present their stories, about 25 minutes of length. And then the jury, after each reading, there'll be a jury discussion of about 30 minutes. And then on that would be the Friday. And then on Saturday, there's a very brief musical introduction to the day from String Orchestra, beautiful band, and playing classical music from musicians of color and Black musicians. There'll be 3 more readings and 3 more jury discussions, and then there's a break, and then Nuria Asfaha, who will do a commentary that will bring everything together. So pick up on different strands and themes and images, and bring the whole thing together in a commentary at the end. And that's the festival, and that's going to be on the 19th, 20th, and 21st of May in Recklinghausen. And please, can everybody now go to the website, Rufespiele Recklinghausen, and click Kaufen for one of the tickets. Though I know, as I say that, I was kind of joking, because I know many people who are watching won't be able to come to Germany. So there are plans to record the festival, and this recording will then be uploaded. The plan is currently that the recordings will happen on the Thursday, for example, and the Thursday recordings will be uploaded on Friday. The Friday recordings will be uploaded on Saturday, and the Saturday recordings will be uploaded on Sunday. So yeah, for those who won't be able to attend, there will be the opportunity to find out more online. I'll stop there because I don't know. I feel a bit like I'm saying all these different things. Are there any questions, actually?
Well, you sort of answered the first one, because as you can imagine, you've whet all of our appetites for the festival. So everybody wants to know, how can they come? But I have a question. Since although we met online years before, the first time we actually met physically was at the Bundestreffen. And
Yes.
so we talked about how your professional career has changed and life has changed in the literature world. I'm wondering how the Bundestreffen has changed, and especially with respect to the children. I mean, when I was there, you had less children, and the ones that you had were tiny. So
Yeah.
I'd like to know how they're doing, how the Bundestreffen has changed, what has been held on to as tradition, and what do you see the new generation, how do they feel about this special community? Your children had the benefit of community, so.
Yeah, it's true. The Bundestreffen is such an important institution in my family's life. So I'm not sure, does everybody know what the Bundestreffen is? I would like to just in case. So the ISD, the Initiative Schwarze Menschen in Deutschland, or the Initiative Black People in Germany, has existed also quite a while, nearly close to 40 years. And they have been organizing an annual meeting of Black Germans or Black people in Germany for as long as they've existed. And this typically takes place in a youth hostel over a long weekend. So most people arrive on the Thursday and leave on the Sunday. And in this meeting, there are different events. There are lectures, there are workshops, there are parties, there's children's workshops, we have hair workshops, we have, clothing. People just go there and don't take part in any workshops, they just hang out for the 3 days, the barbecues and such. And it's, people do sport, go for walks. It's just a space to kind of take a break from being surrounded by only white people as the only Black person in a context or something like this. It's a very healing space for many people. And when I first attended, I remember I first attended when I was on my year abroad. I was actually living in Berlin for 1 year only and then going back. And I attended Bundestreffen in that year, and I was amazed and vowed I would come back as often as possible. And for quite a while, I was a single parent of 3 children who had German family members. So their other side of the family was German. And for various reasons, I thought it's important for them to experience Bundestreffen. So for example, all of my family are Black, and all the family members were white. And I didn't want my children to think, oh, English is Black, German is white, and that's us. We're half or whatever. I wanted them to have a much more fuller, richer understanding of their own identity. And I wanted them to understand themselves also as Black Germans. And so Bundestreffen was really important for that. I also wanted them to be able to speak German. While we were living in the UK, it wasn't so easy for me to keep up a bilingual child raising situation. But when we finally moved to Berlin, that became much easier. Bundestreffen has suffered from some challenges, actually. There was a time when I was on the Vorstand, when I was one of the people organizing Bundestreffen, and involved in managing the ESD, and we had challenges around, and I think the word diversity there works better, because we were an organization that was just like any other organization, I would say, struggling with dominance and marginalization on different aspects. So the ESD has always had an understanding of queer feminism, I would claim, also because many of the people who founded the ESD were queer feminists. Also because the sister organization, ADIFRO, has always been like pulling us up if we made mistakes. Like, so there's always been an understanding and awareness that this is something we need to take seriously, even if we got things wrong. But we have not been traditionally very good at being inclusive around people with disabilities. We had an understanding of feminism, I would say, and maybe of queer, of gay people, lesbian people, but we've not been very good at including trans people. And so those have been in recent years issues that have been brought to our attention by people who have really like bravely outed themselves and committed to trying to make the ESD a more welcoming place, and that's not always gone well, and that's been a painful experience. But I think through that journey, and we're by no means at the end of it, I think there was an understanding for needing to change the structure of the Bundestreffen. I'm not sure, Rosemary, but I think when you came to Bundestreffen, there wasn't really a group that welcomed new people, was there? There wasn't a structure where you knew, yeah. So people used to come to the Bundestreffen like Rosemary, and they'd kind of be thrown into the cold water, sink or swim, right? And it's hard if you if you come from a village somewhere where you were always the only Black person, and then you were you pull up
excuse me, especially if you don't speak German.
Especially if you don't speak German. And then you pull up at this youth hostel, which still looks like Germany, right? Everything is the same. And all of a sudden you see these Black people, it can give you a heart attack, actually. So now that's changed, for example, that there is such a thing as a welcoming committee. People who are new have a place that they can go to and a place that they can keep returning to throughout the weekend. Specific people have made it their task through also Kennenlernspiele, so playful games to learn people's names and find out more. And this is really nice. I'm really grateful to the people who take care of that. And people have made more effort to think about babysitting situations. A lot of single parents attend Bundestreffen with young children, and they are typically better supported now. There's conflict teams there because the place is not free of conflict. There can be people behaving problematically. There needs to be a way to moderate that. And so we have conflict teams. And there's something that I wanted to say that I've forgotten. Oh yeah, and then one final thing that is very important and not resolved is the whole issue of colorism. This is rightly a topic that's now being discussed more in Black German community context, Afro-diasporic context. It's a difficult subject. It's not something, I would say humbly from my opinion, it's not a subject that can just be taken from the US context and placed onto Germany one-to-one. It doesn't quite work in the same way, but it is an issue. So these are things that we're still grappling with.
Thanks so much. And we have another question in the Q&A. Sorry, I have terrible allergies, so I sound like this right now.
Oh, I'm very sorry.
Everyone does. It's fine. How do you balance the writing aspect of your career and the important work you are doing as a leader, and you're creating connections with other writers? So how do you balance all of that, and maybe also add in your family life and everything else?
I was going to say, can I pretend I didn't hear that question? How do
I don't know.
My hot tip to anybody who might be struggling with similar things is to sleep as much as you can, because nothing gets done if you're tired. That's my opinion. If you're tired, It takes twice as long, you make 3 times as many mistakes, and then you have to do it all over again. Sleep. And I'm not under pressure anymore. I mean, that's a weird thing to say. There's lots to do. There's lots I want to do. I try not to say yes to anything that I don't want to do. That already helps a lot. And I have decided that, like this year, for example, I began this year knowing that I'm going to blow all of my writing deadlines. It's just not going to work. And I didn't even try. I just knew there's no way I can do this text and it will come out sounding good if I try to stick to this deadline. So I thought about how can I keep everything going in a healthy way for me. So for example, with the text, I didn't try to force a text out. I tried to keep the text in my mind and think about it. And how do I want someone who's reading this text to feel about it? And I'd write a line here and a paragraph there and then let it sleep on it and come back to it. And it worked out. People were accommodating. I think also we have to be forgiving of ourselves in any case because we're living through a worldwide pandemic. I mean, and now we also have the threat of nuclear war hanging over us. Like it cannot be business as usual. I don't see it. So I decided that I was going to try very hard to be gentle with myself and to do things in my own time, in my own pace. And luckily, I'm in a fortunate position also, very, very privileged position that, you know, if somebody's asked me for a text or a talk or something, then they've got to kind of adjust timeline to fit me. That is something, but I'm able to do it, I think, because I've got very supportive people around me, good understanding people.
Yeah, support, sleep, forgiveness. I think these are all really good lessons to take.
Honestly, sleep. I mean, I know some people can't sleep, and then I don't know what to suggest. Maybe read, but I can. I'm lucky. I can sleep at any time and anywhere, and I just take full advantage of that.
Yeah, too. I have a question for you that might sound, I don't know, I'm just going to ask. So you're a native speaker of English and you've written a novel in German. And as a native speaker of English, as a German professor, I just want to know your trick. How did you do this? And also, what's your relationship, I mean, with the language, with German? How did you get to this place with the language where you feel confident to play with it?
There wasn't a plan. It sounds very weird now when I think about it myself. I'm like, oh, how did I do that? But I remember when I was asked if I had a short story that I'd like to enter into the competition. I had a bit of a nervous breakdown because I thought, oh my God, what does it mean that I'm a German language writer? What does this, when people find out that I still get my der, die and das mixed up, what are they going to say? It was a bit traumatic. And then I thought, no, the reason that I'm a German language writer isn't because I can write perfect German. Clearly, I cannot. The reason I'm a German language writer is because I just do it. I produce a text that's in the German language, and all writers need editors, right? And people who read corrector, like, so that doesn't separate me that much from others. The thing that separates me from other writers who are socialized in German is that my language is, I build it in a different way in my head. It doesn't come intuitively as such. It comes from me making, I hear the language and make different associations purely based on what I understand the meaning might be. I might misunderstand a word. I'll give you an example in a minute. Or I make an association with the sound of the word that German native speakers wouldn't make. So, for example, the misunderstanding was, there's a German word called herrenlos, which means, what does herrenlos mean again? It doesn't have an owner. It's herrenlos. It hasn't got a hair, right? And when I was writing my novel, it was clear to me that the thing I wanted to describe as Herrenlos wouldn't anyway have belonged to a man. It would have belonged to a woman. So I wanted to say Frauenlos. But the word Frauenlos means something completely different. It's not, it means, if I've understood this correctly, it means a man who hasn't got a wife. And I was shocked. I was like, what's that? So I decided to just anyway use the word Frauenlos, you know, as a female version of Herrenlos. And that's something that wouldn't straight away occur to a person who's socialized with the language. The language resides in a different part of their brain. And another thing that I did in Ada's realm is I played with the word wolle. So for me, it's a sound, and I know it means wool, and I know it means, oh, I can't say what it means it's from the verb wollen, whatever. I can't describe what it means, but it's from that verb, right? Wollen. And I heard this sound, wolle, and I made a joke out of it. And the first time that a German friend of mine read this joke, she didn't get it. She didn't hear that word in the same way. So that's something that I can do with my access to the language as someone who learned it. And I think this is a chance, actually, for not to big myself up, I don't mean it that way, but German language literature can only gain, I think, from having authors who do that kind of work in the language. And I'm so happy that Tomagadi won the Leipziger Literaturpreis this year, Preis der Leipziger Buchmesse. Tomagadi is an Israeli author who writes German that is just the way it comes out, how he feels like writing it. He doesn't speak German as his first language. And even, I would say, that's the whole point of him writing the way he writes, because he's also making it a subject. The reason why he writes that way, he calls it broken German, is because his ancestors, I'm not sure exactly, his parents' generation or grandparents' generation, had to flee Germany. And if they had not had to flee Germany, then his German would be different. So he makes actually a political and historical and cultural point of writing German that way. And I think it's amazing and well deserved that he got the prize this year, finally got the recognition for it. When he was presenting his work in Bachmann Prize, in the year that I won the Bachmann Prize, Tomagadi was also part of the competition. And the discussion of his work was really, really sad, because they just kept talking about how he couldn't speak German and really not understanding what he was doing with this language. So I would say I have an easier job, actually, Emily, than you, because I can write, and if it's wrong, I can claim that it's art. And you have to mark people's essays, and yeah, good luck.
We try to promote the idea amongst our students that, yeah, you're in German 101 or whatever, but you're a user of the language, so claim it, and I think, yeah, it's beautiful to, like to play to the possibilities that open up as you play with the language, or as you make those associations through English or in that different part of your mind. There's just so much more possible. Yeah.
Just need to grab a tissue. Sorry, I can still hear you.
Actually, so this goes to another question we have in the Q&A. So are there languages that are difficult to get your point across and others that are easier when translated?
Could you say that one more time, please?
Yeah, are there languages that are difficult to get your point across and others that are easier when translated? So I think they're saying, are there languages that are easier to use at various points, or others that are, more difficult or easier to translate from?
Yeah, I think I get it. I think my question mark is about whether we're talking only about German English, which are the only two languages that I write creatively in, or whether we're talking about my work being translated into other languages, and whether that was difficult. I could speak to both of those points, actually. Yeah. Okay, I'll do that. Why don't I do that? Okay, so languages that are easy and languages that are harder. I think I do feel like a different person depending on which language I'm speaking, definitely. And I could even imagine, although I don't know it for sure, but I don't know why it wouldn't be that way, that I seem to be a different person depending on what language I'm speaking. I remember the author and philosopher Grada Quilomba saying that when people speak a language that's not their first language, they somehow sound younger, not like children, but sort of almost like children, and they sound less intelligent, and somehow what the content of what they're saying doesn't come across as strongly because people are kind of focused on this accent, and the idiomatic use is not quite right, and these grammatical errors. And that does something, I guess, with your confidence also when you're speaking. And I know that I speak with a different confidence if I'm speaking in English or if I'm speaking German. Also, I experience German as a language that doesn't forgive mistakes. Language, like, you can put an N in the wrong place and then the whole thing doesn't make sense anymore. And I don't know why it's so harsh. And in English, I experience English as a much more forgiving language in terms of if you speak it, if you say something wrong or in the wrong word order or something, no one's that worried about it. And I think that's another chance that the German language literature scene has when writers who are not socialized in the German language take this language and make it their own. I think it could be an opportunity for the German then to be used in many, many more contexts, not just Switzerland, Germany, and Austria. And I think it's really beautiful that, for example, we have US American English, British English, we have Indian flavors of English. My mum speaks English in a particular way. Jamaicans speak English, and it all counts. It's all English, right? And then you have some people saying the Queen's English is the best or most important, but no one really, who speaks like that? Yeah. So I think German has a possibility to also, I think that, that's why in my book I use Berlinerisch, Berlinern. I don't know how you say that in English, but this accent from Berlin, I wanted to say, yeah, this is also a language, and it's also a way of a cultural expression, and I think it counts. I know that when I'm at home with my family, we speak English. I think that's to do, I have that wish that I wanted to speak the language that was closest to me with my children. I had a time where I thought, I want my children to be able to speak German. And when we were living in England, I thought maybe I should speak German with them, but I'm glad I gave that up. That wouldn't have worked. But I felt sad that, for example, my parents didn't speak their first language with me and my brother and sister. And so we didn't learn to speak their first language. And I find that really sad. And I think I lost a lot from that. I lost a lot of cultural references and connection to family who don't speak English, for example. So for me, it was important that I would speak English with my children. But we do have the opportunity to speak German as well with each other. And we only do that. It's very rare that we speak German with each other. I've noticed it only happens when we might slip in the odd word, like BVG or kindergarten or something like that, something like that might come up. Or I might use it sometimes when I'm kind of in a bad mood. And the German word schimpfen, it's a great word. And we need to incorporate that actually into the English language, in my opinion. And this schimpfen, it really works well in German, I think. It has its advantage. So that's my thing on how I am in different languages. And then translating Ada's Raum, my novel, into, at the moment it's being translated, it has been translated into Dutch and Italian and English, and it will be translated into Japanese. And this was interesting for me because I had the opportunity to meet with all of the translators online during a kind of online translation workshop, which was convened by an organization called Strahlende Atriumsgespräch. I think that was in November last year. So I heard a little bit about the challenges of translating my novel into these different languages. And of course, across the languages, there were different issues that came up. Some of the wordplay in German was tricky across the languages. In my memory, though, sometimes like the English translator had an easier job because anyway, the joke I was making was kind of from an English background, you know. Then I remember the Japanese translator asking me a specific question that wasn't relevant to anybody else. And that was to do with the fact that one of the characters has a sister. And she says, is the sister older or younger? Because in Japanese, it's a different word. And that was really fascinating. And then you had this whole issue about gender. Like, I try to write in a way that doesn't use the plural masculine as the standard plural form. Wait a minute. Yeah, plural form, which I think I got that 99%. I managed it, but translating it into Dutch, they still had to find an issue, you know. And the whole discussion about gendering in the German language is a big topic in Germany, but not necessarily in Netherlands. In Netherlands, it may just read as a mistake. And it wasn't at all an issue for Japan again, because they do a completely different thing. You know, they don't do gendering. So it was really, really interesting. Yeah.
There's lots of questions coming in now. And this one from Patrick maybe brings us back to this question of learning German and speaking German and coming at it from different angles. So that reminds me, he says, of Abbas Kadia's approach to learning German that he presents in Deutsch für alle. Could you perhaps talk a little bit more about grammatical prescriptivism in German, in the German language contexts, and how you have experienced it?
I'm just thinking if I have an example. I would have had to have prepared a good answer to this question, Patrick, because there are loads of examples where I've encountered that. But I think I wrote a series of texts for the Goethe Institute last year, a column about language. And I know that I talked a little bit about that issue in that column. So I'd have to look back at what I wrote to be able to answer that question. But like I said, I find German, I mean, I really loved learning German. I think my brain works that way, that I like to figure out the rules, and it's a very structured language. It's got clear grammatical rules. And if you learn the rules, like maths and formula, right? And 1 + 1 = 2. And if you have accusative and this line and a masculine word, then they always be. And I was like, yeah, this is nice. But it's pulling it all together when you're speaking is hard work. And as I was saying, when I'm speaking German and I'm with a person who is abgelenkt, who kind of, they can't hear the content of what I'm saying because I've used this particular idiom in the wrong way, or didn't say der, die, or das correctly, then that's kind of frustrating. And I have experienced people correcting me while I'm speaking, which is not always good, I think. And I don't know, it makes me think about what the point of communication is. So it is the point of communication that you have to have everything exactly perfect, which who does? I mean, even in English, I'm going to make grammatical mistakes, right? Or is the point that you understand what the person is saying? And then it's much better to kind of be focused on the understanding level of communication, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And so to move slightly in a different direction, so Kavina King, who's the VGHRA vice president and wonderful she says she's listening to your book on, she listened to your book on Spotify, and it was a real treat. You and Dela do a fantastic job together. Can you talk about how working with Dela came to be and how it was working with her? Can you also talk in more detail about the process of recording your book and voicing or becoming Ada or Ada? What were the personal and physical challenges of that?
Oh, man. Dela Double-Emansi is a friend of mine. Sadly, we don't see each other so often but she's a brilliant person and talented actress, and also an activist. She does what I do. I do this in literature and she does that or for theatre and film. So we have a lot of crossover. And actually what happened was with this recording of the audiobook, it came about too late, to be honest. My book was already published. My book was published in February, and the request to do the audiobook came in March, I believe, which is very unusual because normally they plan the audio recordings at the same time to coincide with the publication of the book to maximize the sales of both. If the book's already appeared, then they assume that the recording won't sell so well. That's normally what happens. So it was actually quite strange that they did go ahead and decide to do the audiobook for Adas Raum. And then they said to me they would like to do it with two voice actors, actresses. And they wanted me to do one. They made the suggestion that I do the one voice, which is all the chapters that are narrated from the first person perspective of Ada or the Ada. And then another person to do the other chapters. And I think in my memory, I got to make suggestions. And I suggested Dila and I begged Dila. Like I said, it was very short notice and she already had loads to do and she didn't actually know how she was going to fit it in. And I said, just do it anyway. And so I was really grateful that she said yes, and she managed to squeeze it in. The person, interestingly enough, the person who was the director, so who was kind of coaching us through the recording, also isn't a first language German speaker. She's French. She's brilliant. She had everything absolutely perfect. All the pronunciation, she really drilled into me. And she read through the book, of course, before the recording and picked up many, many more. Anyone who's got like the first Auflage up until the 6th Auflage, loads of mistakes. All of the mistakes were found by Celine. And so, Dila and I were not in the studio at the same time. I haven't actually seen Dila for a couple of years, actually. I did my recordings in 1 week and then Dila did her recordings in another week. I didn't talk to Dila about how her experience was, but she's a professional actress. I assume she had a great time. I had a terrible time because it's really hard work. And I realized that I write long sentences with really difficult words, and I won't do that again. Or I won't record the book if I've done that. One of the two, I have to decide. I found it really hard. And it's a completely different experience also when I'm reading for an audience live. I'm gonna make mistakes and nobody minds, and then I just repeat it, or it doesn't matter. So if you're recording an audiobook where every syllable has to be, and if I can't remember, I think I was wearing a scarf that fell off or something, then you have to do the whole sentence again, and nerve-wracking. I mean, I cannot say I enjoyed it. Not because of the people, just I don't consider myself to be a voiceover actress. So yeah, I don't want to do that again.
I have to agree with Kavina though, and I really like the recording.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know, there's something about the author reading the book to you that's really nice too.
Yeah. I was also doing it in German though, and I was writing things in German that look good on paper. But there's this word, for example, Seufzer. It's a terrible word. I will never use it in my work again. Terrible word.
Oh God.
Yeah.
So back to our questions about balance and sleeping and all this important self-care work. Can you talk in more specifics? And this is Kavina again, who's finishing her dissertation. And I'm sure we're all like in different positions with our work and everything. So where do you sit? When do you sit down to write? Are you listening to music when you write? Do you write by hand? These sort of more specific details of your writing process.
Is that writing anything or writing novels? Kavina. Like I write short text. Sometimes it's been known I would write poetry or I write short story, writing anything. Okay. I think what I do, I mean, usually the standard answer and what I do is I write here. This is I'm trying to decide if I can show you my room, if I haven't got anything embarrassing. I think I can show you my room. So this is my room. This is I've got a very fancy, very nice screen, double screen, and that's my desk. And I'm fortunate that I have a room that I can use as a home office. And I do most of my work here. But technically, this is where I do like the admin stuff and writing. Is there a window? Of course, yes, here's the window. It's very dark. I do invoicing and emails and being annoyed about how much tax I have to pay, and that's what I do here. And then when I'm writing creatively, that can happen pretty much anywhere. My favorite place to write creatively would be in a cafe, actually. And I have, I don't know if anyone knows what a remarkable is, but I have one of these, which is, I can use it like to write by hand, or I'll write on scraps of paper. I might be listening to music and then come up with an image or an idea or have a feeling about one of the characters that they might do or say something, and I'll make a note of it. I sometimes send myself a WhatsApp message or a voice message. That's also happened in the past. And I try to take the pressure off things by considering that everything I do as part of the work. Sleep is also part of the work. I'm convinced of it. So when I'm cooking and I think of something and I record it, that's part of the writing. That the actual sitting down at the desk is just the mechanics. I've already done all the work through, dreaming or whatever else I was doing, doodling, drawing pictures, all of that counts. And then when I get down to, because I find it easier to amend a text. So if I've written something and I'm reading it, then I'll add another word or I'll add another idea. And that's much easier to get into the flow of writing than to stare at a blank page on a screen and then to start, from the first line.
Mariana, one of our co-sponsors for today, said that in her class, she reads with her students the short story Liebe. When you write, where's the line between the private and the personal and the fiction?
That's a very good question. That's a really good question. I think about that a lot because I think to be able to write the things I write, I need to draw from an authentic place. It needs to come from somewhere. And a lot of what I write, the emotions are real. So if I'm writing about something that made me, or if I'm writing something and the reader should feel sad or angry or melancholy or completely ecstatic, those are feelings that I've experienced at some point that I'm trying to remember. What does it feel like and how can I describe that and bring that over on the page? So the feelings are real. The events not necessarily so. There's a lot of things I write in Ada's Round that I didn't experience firsthand. But I would say I did my research on, or I recently somebody said to me that I'm a really empathetic person, and I thought about that as a skill, as a quality that I have. I think many people who've been brought up as females in this society have been forced to be empathetic, whether they wanted to or not. But also it's something that I draw on from my writing, and I kind of really hone in on that. And I think that's a skill that has worked to my advantage. And then there is this writing of, so Liebe was one of the first texts I wrote where I was very explicitly writing about things that actually happened and had names to those things. That happened because I was asked to write a text for that anthology about what it means to be a Black parent raising Black children in a white society. And I felt like I couldn't really write that text without including the perspective of the children. I didn't want to write about them. I wanted to write with them. So I asked Tyrell if we could have a conversation, and then if I could use that conversation to write the text. Actually, I wanted to write the text with him, but for the purposes of the anthology, and I really understood it, it was fine. They wanted to have an author, not two authors, you see what I mean? So that was fine for him also. He's not interested in writing this kind of stuff, but he was very, very happy to have the conversation with me. And at every step of the way, when the text was being edited, I kept showing him the suggestions for corrections and asking him what he thought. And so he was always, for me, he was a co-author. He doesn't consider himself to be a co-author, but I do. Yeah, and the reason why I went there with Liba was because I thought I would have liked to have read a text like this myself back at the time when I was first struggling with school-aged children in this society. I really had a hard time. And my children really had a hard time. And I remember feeling isolated and not really having anyone to talk about with, or not many people understood what I was going through. It was very specific. It was a very specific kind of discrimination that I was experiencing, which had to do with racism, but it also had to do with class discrimination. You know, I was a single parent on welfare, 3 boys, 2 different fathers. And I'm a dark-skinned Black woman speaking German with an accent. I was always like placed in a specific corner of, oh, she needs help, and she needs to get her life in order. We need to tell her what to do. And my children did not conform. They were very outspoken about the experiences that they were having. They did not want to just keep their head down and ignore it. And I didn't force them to. My parents probably would have forced me to, or did, but I kind of felt like I wanted them to be able to advocate for themselves as a life skill. So we didn't have an easy time in school, and I wanted to write about that. I also thought that I was not the only one. Even though I felt so isolated, I was pretty sure that other mothers with a similar background to me in a similar situation were going through the exact same thing. And I've since heard from people who said, yeah, I had exactly the same. So I wanted to also say we didn't go through it for nothing. At least this text has come out of it, and people can use that then, hopefully, to draw attention to these experiences of discrimination that many Black children have in school. Yeah.
A lot of what you're saying here in the text Liba has resonances, speaking of resonances, with the Kantaras. I think I saw Janine Kantara here, and
Janine's here?
Was I'm not sure if she's still here. Oh yeah, yes.
Hey, Janine.
And her letter to her children that was published, and I think in Pablo Buchanan, and then going back to John's video that he does with his son. So there's sort of an ever-growing sort of corpus of this kind of work that engages with the next generation about sort of lived experiences and things like that. So I love that.
Yeah, and it's also about, if I may jump in, it's
Yes.
not only what our generation teaches the next generation. I think the Kantaras have this also very clear. What I love about what this family does is there's a lot of feeding back. The children are also teaching the parents, and it's like, it's a movement in waves. It's not only one way. And yeah, I'm fascinated. I really learn a lot from my children, and it's really, sometimes I feel really hopeful about what's happening, what the next steps are going to be. And it's, yeah, great.
There's something special. I mean, now as a parent, I can talk about, my little daughter. There's something special about this next generation. And I'm not sure if all parents feel that way about their children, but there's something really like they kind of take care of each other in really interesting ways. They're gifting each other things even at 6 years old. I mean, that could just be like the groups that I'm with, but I see that more broadly too. So anyway. So this is from Julie. Do you have a favorite work of yours that if someone wanted to start reading your body of work, that would, really encapsulate who you are or who you really are?
That's a nice question. I think the answer, at least today, is the things I'm thinking while smiling politely. Yeah. Say something, Rosemary.
I knew that. I knew that. I was waiting for that answer because I think you just shared yourself unfiltered a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a story that I wrote as a challenge to myself. The year that I wrote that story, I'd lost my job, actually. So talking about incorporating feelings, right? I had worked for somebody who turned out to be not a very ethical person and treated me quite badly towards the end of my employment there. And then I was, depending on who tells the story, I was either sacked or I left. It was somehow both at the same time. In any case, I was full of rage and felt very hurt. And I also was struggling with estrangement, a family member I was estranged from. And and I had no money. I was like, ah. And then I think I became pregnant as well that year. So I was on welfare, and I thought, okay, now or never. I'm going to write my first novel now. I've got time before the baby comes, and time. And then I challenged myself to write, and I ended up with this novella. It didn't quite make it to a full length novel, but it did everything that I wanted it to do as a story. Yeah, I wanted to write a story with a female character, a Black female mother, a Black mother, who is a complicated figure. She's not just a person who experiences discrimination and we should all feel sorry for her, but she's also a person with privilege. She's a person, she is British. She has an EU passport. At the time, Britain was still in the EU. And she abuses that privilege, if you like, to bring harm to another person who doesn't have passport privilege. And it was a story where I wanted to think about what could it look like to write about your own privilege, not only about marginalization. And I also wanted to experiment with the structure. So that's a story that's told backwards. And I wanted to write about, that was the other thing I did. I challenged myself to write a story where the main character doesn't have a name. That was not that easy. Yeah, but the point of it being that this main character is many things to many people, and she kind of loses herself, and the story is about her trying to figure out who she really is and such. So yeah, it did a lot of things that I liked, and I think I was at my freest at that point. Now when I write, I know that there's, expectations, and people know my work already, and they're hoping for something specific. And back when I wrote the things, I just wrote for myself. Yeah.
We're coming to an end, sadly, of our time together, but I have one question that I must get in before we leave. And because it's me, it has to do with the children. So I would like to know, how are the children managing with professional mom? And which or are any following in your footsteps? What are they doing now? What are their aspirations?
What can I say about the children? I don't want to, I honestly, it sounds a lot evasive. I don't want to out them too much. I'd like them to talk about their things when they want to talk about, but I would say, how do they deal with this? They are very supportive, really, really, they're very supportive. And this is going to sound a bit weird. They don't do things like, they're not watching tonight. They don't particularly read all my books or anything like that, but they're on a very emotional level. Like they're there for me emotionally, I would say. So this is nice. So I always feel grounded with my children. They're never going to come to me and go, oh, you're really famous, Mum. They're not going to do that. They'll be like, yeah, what's for dinner? Oh, you have a reading today. Oh, that's nice. But make dinner first. Yeah. And I kind of like that by now. I think I suffered a little bit at the beginning when I thought, don't you care? But now I'm like, no, it's good that they keep it real, you know? And
Have they Googled you? Have they Googled you?
Do you know what? Lewis Googled me today, my third son. I was so shocked. He Googled, wait a second. I wonder if, how could I get this onto the, I can't get it into the Zoom. Anyway, he Googled, what is Sharon Otoo worth? Can you imagine? How much money is Sharon Otoo worth? And the answer came up. Oh, where's the answer? Sharon Dodua Otoo net worth. Her net worth has been growing significantly in 2019, 2020. Her net worth in 2020 was $1 million to $5 million. It's the first I've heard of it, by the way. And so Lewis is happy because he thinks I'm rich. And Tyrell, my second son, who was in Liebe and who is an actor, he is now living in the UK. He's living in Brighton, and he's doing various things, and he's still pursuing acting, which I really love. And yeah, this I can say. I think I can say this. There's a series called Aktenzeichen XY. So Tyrell's going to be in that in June. You can watch out for him then.
Okay, well, it looks like we've come to the close, but I want to thank you so much, Sharon, for sharing your time and words with us today. Emily and I are incredibly thankful to Davidson College, DEFA Film Library and German Studies at UMass Amherst, and the Department of Central, Eastern, and Northern European Studies at UBC Vancouver for making today's event possible. Today's recording will soon be uploaded to our YouTube channel at Black Germans. The recordings from our recent 10th anniversary conference are also now online. Subscribe and turn on the notifications so that you'll know when new ones are added. Sign up for our newsletter and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Eventbrite for details about coming events. Mark your calendars for April 12th, when we will be hosting a conversation on Africans in the Ukraine with Dr. Pierrette Herzberger-Fofana, a member of the European Parliament representing Germany. We invite you to donate to the BGHRA and purchase items from our online store. Find out how to do so on our website at bghra.org. Finally, we hope that you've enjoyed today's conversation as much as we have, and we thank you again for your time and attention.